Okay, welcome back. So this time what we're going to be working towards is player health and player damage, or rather enemy damage. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm sure you've seen this in other projects before where they've done it's a very straightforward system. So what we're going to be doing is first of all the player health. We're going to have a straightforward UI that's constantly updated every time a collision with the enemy occurs, and based on that collision, we'll do a certain amount of damage. Okay, so to get started, we've created a player health script, and we're simply going to add a text, game over. So if a player hits a certain amount of health, so 0 or less, then the text will appear. I skipped a little bit ahead after I created some of the floats and such. And basically this is going to be getting the component at the very start, followed by having the current health equal the max health, and then have it updated every time we encounter. Having the fill amount bar, which is basically the same thing as what we did with the hunger, update every time we call it. Once we've done that, we obviously got to create the text itself, so the game over text and the UI for the health bar. So that's what I'm quickly doing now. This isn't going to be a very complex health system. I don't think we need it to be right now. I don't really feel like this game needs a really complex health bar or health system. But we may end up having a shield or equivalent of a turtle shell later on, which may give it extra resistance or maybe a few extra lives or something along that line. So as you can see, we've put on the amount. Same thing as we've done in the past with the hunger, and I'm just trying to choose something that's fitting for now, because I'll change it. I'll create some custom UI later on in my own time. And once I've set it all up and determined that it's 100, which is going to be what the max health is, then I create a collision for every time the player encounters the enemy, every time they collide with the enemy, or anything with the tag of enemy. And I think I set it to about 20, how much damage the player can take. Yeah. So I set it to enemy damage. I create the float, of course, because I forgot to create it. And then what I need to do here is, just like I did in the previous episode where I created a barrier very briefly, I need to create a barrier now for the sharks, our enemies. And I've already created it for food, so all I do is copy over the barrier, because it's pretty much the same thing, just a little bit bigger. And then I already created a layer for enemies instead of fish. So instead of food barrier, I've created a enemy barrier, which is pretty much the same thing, just call something different so that I can mask it if I need to. So there you go, I've created the enemy barrier that's around it, which is encasing, which is surrounding the previous capsule barrier, or collision should I say. And now what we can do is we can set certain monster triggers like we did in previous episodes. I then did the same thing for the other sharks, which are other enemies, and then turned them back into a prefab. And what's happening here is every time I hit them, I wanted the effects of them being knocked out, which is exactly what we're getting. I do end up changing that later because I think it looks a little bit silly. But there you go, enemy damage is now doing 20. We also fixed the minus equal, if you didn't notice that. The current health minus equal enemy damage was the wrong way around, the symbols. So I did change that, and then every time we encounter the island, or when we hit the island, it's going to reset it back to its max health. So we're going to get a full, it's going to completely set it back to. Now I'm going to change that later on, but for now it's really just for testing. But I want a different way for the player to either gain health, maybe determines how high the hunger is, like in a lot of other survival games, or perhaps some other way, because I think it's a bit too easy to just go to their island and fully heal. I'm just dotting these enemies around just for testing purposes. Later on I'll have a spawner specifically for them, and that way I can control them in like an array, so if one despawns I can maybe create a new one. So I'll do that later, but for now I'm just dotting these around for testing purposes for a while I try and figure out their damages and how spread out I want them. So once I've done that, I do a quick test to see how it is, rotating, The enemy, once they get stunned, or I'm calling them stunned right now, but it's just an effect of how I've done the code. But right now, once they go out of the area and then back into their collision zone, they come back to attack, which is kind of how I originally wanted it, but I've decided to change it now. So that's the health and damage. It wasn't a very complicated bit of script, but it was still necessary and still quite easy. Look forward to the next episode, because next time what we're going to be looking at is saving and loading data. So we want to be able to save the resources and then reload them if we die or if we reload the game. So look forward to that. See you next time.